know, with that alone, you can already go crazy. So if you hear the whole movement. Anyway, also she used these kinds of intervals. We call it quartal. Quartal meaning a fourth, and quintal a fifth. So does that remind you of anything? Chinese, right? What else does it remind you of? Kulintang. Kulintang. It's a pentatonic scale because they did not use the diatonic 7-note scale that our ears are really adapted to. So Lucrecia Casilag actually blended the East and the West. And along with her, there was also Eliseo Pajaro, who actually, I think, he tried to be modern or avant-garde during his time. Unfortunately, his melodies were very sequential. You know what sequential means? It means that the melodies repeat, but maybe they go up or they go down. For example, so melodies that are the same but go up or down, they are called sequential. So Dr. Pajaro could not get out of the whole of the Western influence. So trying to be modern or Filipino in that way, he still used the form and he still used of course, the Western instruments to produce his music. The other one that was in that same range of compositional style was Alfredo Benaventura. Okay. Alfredo Benaventura also had some what we call chromaticism, or what we say as something that is dissonant. But in spite of the dissonance, you could hear that he was still very, very tonal. And the last composer to have this kind of medium was Rosendo Santos. He is not very popular here because he spent most of his time in the United States. But he was so prolific. Once in a telephone interview, he told me that he had this job in a church, and every week he has to play an original composition. So every week he has so many pieces to play. So it's funny because, you know, my doctoral dissertation was on Philippine piano concertos, and one of those was Rosendo Santos. He even called me up to ask if I had a copy of his concerto because he had no copy. You know, at that time, unfortunately, composers had only one copy, and it so happened that if the house burned, then there is no more trace. No? I think that was the effect for some composers. No? Yeah. Hernani Cuencos. And ngayon with Ondoy, I think, sino nga ba sa Ondoy? There was a composer whose works were greatly damaged by Ondoy last year. San Pedro? Sangono? But Mr. San Pedro died much earlier than Ondoy. Original manuscripts. I see. Well, anyway, so after Casilag et al., those who employed East and Western, there were the likes of Professor Jose Maceda and Dr. Ramon Santos, who went neither west. I mean, they did not go west. They were either pro-Filipino or pro-ethnic or pro-avant-garde. Unfortunately, the works of Maceda were really too impractical to perform. He had the work that had to be played for 100 cassettes. He had the work to be played by so many hundreds of voices, you know. And I was even part of that work when I was a freshman at UP in a circular church. And we had these wooden things that you play during New Year's Eve just to make noise. And so we were all laughing. Why does it have to be circular? You know, I mean, how many circular churches do we have in the Philippines anyway? Why can't this be performed in a regular church or in a concert hall or something like that? I don't know, maybe he had these reasons. As for Dr. Ramon Santos, his style was really more avant-garde, and really extremely dissonant. So unfortunately, much as they were creative and definitely they were well-schooled and highly intellectual, their brand of music was not really accepted, and to some degree, they were not considered that relevant. So in terms of globalization, these composers, they had one thing in common from Adonai to Casilag to San Pedro to the Triumvirate to Ramon Santos and Maceda. They were all well schooled. Unfortunately, the globalization did not take effect. And as Jim said earlier, sometimes it is his own theory because we really don't have theories to explain what is wrong or what has to be done. My own theory is that, first of all, it could have been the marketing. A lot of Filipino classical music, I'm talking of classical music, had not gone beyond the premiere performance. So most of the time, when a work is commissioned to a composer, commissioned, yes, for a composer, he does that work and he is paid either by maybe cultural center or some other organization, and then it is performed. After the performance, for some reason, it is never performed again. And there are so many pieces like that. So how can one thing get global if it is only in one performance? So marketability, I guess, is one thing. The other thing that I would conjecture is that sometimes our brand of nationalism may get too far, that sometimes it limits our own creativity. Sometimes in the process of being too nationalistic, we want only things that are Filipino. Of course, it's good, why not? But sometimes we close our eyes to the world. First of all, we referee ourselves in the process. So much so that when one is Filipino, of course, we emulate, etc., not realizing that there are so many things to learn outside the country. Another thing would be the treatment of the basic elements. I noticed that in classical music, in Filipino classical music, as I said earlier, the melodies were highly sequential. And then the harmonies were quite predictable. For example, in Dahil Sa'yo, this is a predominance of tonic, dominant, and slightly subdominant. Okay? If you go to other songs, that would be more or less the same story. So we are not adventurous enough in terms of our harmonic exploitation. Form-wise, I think that the influence of the foreign shores have actually imprisoned us. We cannot get out of form. No matter how avant-garde we may try to be, we are still there. In terms of the Filipino songwriters, as I'm sure Jim had said this before, one problem that exists with us is that we try to be an imitator of the West. I remember we had Neil Sedaka of the Philippines. You see Nori Jacinto ba yun or something? We had, of course, si Eddie Mesa for Elvis Presley. And I was one of those who idolized these people, si Jumides Maturan for Perry Como. I was one of those who idolized Jumides Maturan. And I did not care for Paul Anka or hindi ko naman sila kilala. At least isa nakikita ko sa TV. But it's in that sense that we think that the highest point of our achievement would be to copy as close as possible our Western counterparts. And so we fail to be original in our sense. As they say, make things... the songwriter now, and I'm not talking of Philippine songwriters only, the songwriter has the luxury of being creative without being bound to the compositional rules and regulations that classical composers have to follow. Well, first of all, the songs are generally short, so there is really no time for thematic development, for textural treatments that are different, yeah, and for variations. and there's only a limited possibility for harmonic exploration, etc. So anyway, our um, our songwriting is really limited in that sense, no? So it is a luxury, and at the same time it is a liability, because it doesn't permit us to really shine. With a 3-minute or 2-minute work, it is really difficult to make a penetration. Now, probably the reasons why Anak and Dahil Sa'yo have made it would not, I don't know about Anak, but Dahil Sa'yo, it's probably the connection of Mrs. Marcos to the Lettermen. You know, when Mrs. Marcos was First Lady, the Lettermen were invited to perform here. Of course, they wanted to please her, so that is one way. I don't know about Anak. I really don't know about that. But I heard that, you know, years ago, when I was still under Weya Records, which is now Universal Records, I was asked to include Anak in one of my albums. And I was surprised, or we were all surprised, including the Weya people, that whereas the royalty then for songs averaged 1,500 pesos, now you know how long that was, no? How long ago that was. Anak was fetching 18,000. 18,000 for royalty. And to our surprise also, it did not go to Freddie Aguilar. It went to Vicor. Di ba? Dick Del Rosario. And I heard also that one time Freddie Aguilar wanted to use it and he was banned from using it.